here again we have our Maldives. I have placed this on the pool edge. We're about to ask the customer to come out and look about how she likes it centered. Whenever you're installing pools, they may taper the concrete away from the pool so you don't get runoff in the pool. Sometimes the coping is thicker or thinner than the concrete, so there's just lots of variables. It's never going to be perfect. So this step is mandatory quite often. So today I'm going to mark, and we'll do that in a little bit, and I'll show you how to cut this to match the concrete. So when we start to match the middle piece or any of these rocks to the coping and to the concrete, you can notice that there's a big gap right here, and we don't want that. We want to match this curved surface. You can just match this surface right here with your marker, cut it out, and later on it'll sink right up. Without a big gap in the back of the waterfall here, if you get yourself some shim, find the highest point that it sticks up, then you just get something to put your marker right at that level. So my marker is, maybe just a hair beneath it or on that line. And now we're gonna not move the waterfall, more like drag this along. And you wanna stay on the ground because we're gonna match the concrete, and the concrete's changing. No need to kill your marker, no need to drag super hard. And we are gonna chop off quite a little bit of this, but it's all gonna look pretty cool in the end. I just marked that black line across it and where I'm gonna level it out. I start with a knife, so we just call this a boning knife or a fish knife, something like that. The next option is a moldy tool or oscillating tool. And then the next option is your Sawzall, once again with the fine tooth blade. These will just cut real nice and clean. So the outside layer of our Universal Rocks product is what we call hard coat, and just sort of a polymer. And that gets more difficult to cut the thicker it is, way more than the foam does. So the tools, the electric tools, usually we're using those to cut a lot of that or a really thick foam. And now I just clean it up with the knife. So here I've just cut through all this. You can't really tell yet, but what we're gonna do is place it on the edge and see how it lines up. Okay, so then we just marked the back. I cut the back. I made room for the pipe. Everything's pretty close to level. So what I'm gonna do now is match the front of the rock to the coping, and that'll make it line up and just look really clean. So I've just done the waterfall piece. It lines up beautifully, I might say. And now we're gonna put the edge rocks on. I may even level the back again first. So when placing the edge rocks, it's this one over here, the edge rock 1 is trying to tilt. And when you don't know what you're really dealing with, if you're new to this, you may think it's off level. Really, it's just not sitting flat, or the front's touching something when the back, and it won't let the back come down. So just give it a good look over. Sometimes you just gotta press on it, and that's how you mark it. And that's all I gotta do here. Mark it correctly. Once I cut it, it'll fit up real nice and square. So on this pool, we've got a very curvy pool, and we're dealing with a concave edge, which is the best sort of edge for any of these. Some people that may have a more modern or just a square pool, what they're gonna deal with is they won't be able to just cut one side of all these rocks, or even just like sometimes I'll leave the middle uncut, like for the coping. They won't be able to do that because they've got to match this whole side to that coping. And although it's flat, it's still got the round edge on it. Maybe it's round nose coping, whatever it may be. So they're gonna have to channel down that whole edge down here, the whole lip. And that's gonna be how you beat like a flat pool, a square pool, versus where I just get to touch 2 points of the pool and that's all I'm touching. So right here, I've cut all my edges. That's usually the longest part of the install. It's just more tedious and you want to make sure you're doing it right. So now we're going to take this fat lead pencil that I found, the coolest thing ever on Amazon, and I'm going to run this along the whole edge, and then you'll see what happens next. We've just cut everything, I've marked it all, and now the next step is to flip this all over, and we're going to place these treated 2x4s underneath, and then we'll get those bolted to the ground, and that's how you mount the whole waterfall down. So with the pipe, I've been playing around. I made some space inside the rock. All you need is about that much for one fitting. So I'll just cut this down like 2 inches. That way I can fit my 1-inch elbow on and still not be any much taller than that. And we'll be lining up just right with the waterfall. Whenever I cut this pipe, I get all this water out that's usually in there, because if you are trying to glue any fitting on here and you leave that water right at the top, you're gonna mix the water with the glue and they are not friends at all. So it'll mess your glue up instantly. So it's a good idea to just get it out, let it dry while you're doing all your other stuff, and you'll be safe by the end. So here we've got the treated wood once again. Make sure it's treated. If it's not treated, it only lasts about like a year or two, then the whole thing will rot and be very unsafe. They say this lasts 10 to 20 years, so that's a bit more promising. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna measure from this line, which is our outside perimeter. I'm gonna put my block on the inside, and then I'm gonna measure what is that gap where this sits level. I don't want it like up like this. I don't want it cockeyed or anything like that. Just get it level with the flush with the edge. And right there reads 2 inches, and the other side's 2 inches. And that is 2 inches from this corner. So we're gonna come in about 2 inches from the very front of the coping. 2.5 again. Hold it down and mark my square. And then, so I don't forget later, I draw these squiggly lines coming out. And now I know where to put the screws in when I'm finished. Today we're good and we're lucky and we're set because this is a rigid pipe. So that just means it's shooting straight down. Your other option is the pool plumbers might run this up with the flexible hose, and that might be coming at an angle. So what you wouldn't want to do is when we drill these holes in, you don't have to go very deep, but you know, if you're just rushing it or whatever, you might drill through the pipe. So with this edge rock, I was able to fit one up here without doing anything, but the other side has a lot of foam, which I would say is a good thing. You want these rocks to be sturdy, you want to be able to walk on them, and that definitely helps. But what we're gonna have to do is make a spot so this block fits in there. So that may be my knife or my sawzall or the multi-tool, and we'll just cut out a bigger than the block, a section so this sits down. So obviously I just cut that block out. This block will now fit in there nice and snug. And I'll just come over here and mark where that's gonna lay on the concrete. So we've done all the hard stuff. Now go ahead and use this drill. We're gonna use these wedge anchors. I use the 3/8 by 3 3/4. These guys are gonna go through the wood into the concrete, and then the bottom explodes after you hammer it in, and that's what holds these in the ground. So again, you're not gonna have to drill very far down. We're just doing that plus the piece of wood in there. These fiberglass pools and some of your gunite pools, well, with the fiberglass, they say they have about a 6-inch lip of the actual blue part of the pool. So that's coming out about 6 inches. sometimes that lip is gonna have some of the plumbing in there, but you just want to make sure if you're able to ask your pool builder, your pool installer, that's a good question to ask. I'm gonna put both feet on the wood, and then I'm gonna hold the drill between my legs. Just hammered down all the wedge anchors into the bolt or into the blocks. Now I want to use my impact drill, and we're going to use this socket that's 9/16. Put it on this driver bit, and beats a crescent wrench or anything like that. And now we're just going to go through and zap all these down so it's super secure. Now we've got to the gluing part. I've bolted everything down, drew all my lines, all that. Now I wanna, before I flip it over and start screwing, we gotta get the plumbing run. This is meant for flexible to rigid, or flexible to flexible, or rigid to rigid, it's fine. But most other glues aren't really designed for the flex tubing. You can have primer, which is like the purple one that everybody can see. That's usually done for like city codes, all that, but cleaner is better for the flexible stuff. I'm going to attach a 1.5 inch coupling. Then that's gonna have a 1 inch to 1.5 inch reducer. And then we're gonna go to a 1 inch elbow. I'm trying to get away from the wall of the waterfall. Instead of having my tubing come up, I'm just gonna come out this way, so I don't have to fight with this whole backside. The cleaner and definitely the primer that's purple, none of that is good for your concrete. So especially when you have like a lovely coping that's been overlaid like this or stained, you really don't want the primer, cleaner, glue to get on it. So it's okay if it's underneath the rock, you'll never see it, but you definitely don't want that falling outside. So I always do my all the gluing and stuff either within the rock or inside of where it's gonna go. Every time you glue, you want to put the fitting on all the way down and then do a quarter turn. And what that's gonna do is pop all the bubbles that's within the glue. If you don't do that, you're leaving a room for any leaks to happen as the bubbles sort of grow. So the next part is fitting this flexible hose up into the water feature. What we've done up here is we've put another 1.5 inch to 1 inch reducer. A bushing is what they call it. We supply these Maldives kits with a 1.5 inch fitting. And what you want to do, because I'm going down to the 1 inch, we're just going to put this in. I'm going to glue all that in first, and that way I can play with this stuff down here rather than being upside down trying to play with the stuff up in the top. Now we're going to glue this 1 inch pipe up into the fitting I've put in there. Let that dry for a second. Don't want to put the plumbing this way because when I put the rock down, it's going to crunch up. So I want to put the plumbing coming out sideways because we have a lot more length than we do width. The trick with getting the plumbing to fit in there, if you don't, if you leave too much, it will actually push on the waterfall. Try to stop it from sitting nice and flush. Sometimes this has enough tension to do so. So a good idea is I usually just put the hose in here at like a full sort of circle, and then I pull back on it a bit. So now when I cut it here, it's got some room to play with, rather than putting it all the way. I cut it and now I can't go back anymore. And then we want to line it up as if it were going to be glued. So I got to twist it a bit, and that's where it'll line up with this elbow that I'm going to glue last. My wood block is a little bit too far out. It's good so I can show you guys what to do. Basically the wood is sitting where the foam needs to sit. so I'm just gonna cut the foam out, and it's a lot easier than cutting the wood. I just cut the foam out of there. As you can see, this mess under me, and that's exactly what the issue was. So whenever you do the gluing here, it's a good idea to just, on the final glue, especially when you're about to set everything down and sort of put a lot of tension on stuff, it's good to just maybe rest it here for 2-3 minutes. So before we start screwing everything down, I've already plumbed all this. Now what I want to do is lay it down, get it in place, and then we're gonna go to the plumbing, or like the pump or whatever, and we're gonna turn the valve on and make sure nothing is leaking under here. Whenever you're putting these waterfalls in, we do just have a open fitting on the top. You just place a pretty heavy rock on top. That'll do the job. We're just gonna open it semi, not all the way, and just until the waterfall starts looking like a good amount of pressure. So we've got our beautiful waterfall running. I've turned the equipment on, all that. Now we just want to really double check there's no leaking going on. And all you got to do is let this teeter over a little bit, stick your head under there, give it a 10-second look, and then if you don't see any drips, we're clear to start screwing it in. And these guys will like just suck the whole waterfall in and nothing's going anywhere. So with this one, with the main waterfall, I just use the 4-inch screws right here. I don't like to mess with potentially getting the plumbing, so with these guys, you get to have the ability to drill the big guy, the big screw headlock 6-inch. You can come down through the top into one of these blocks rather than just the side. So for the last step, we've got all our rocks screwed in. Everything's stable, everything's sturdy. We're gonna start putting our M1 on. What we're gonna do is put it on any of the gaps, any of the screws. We're gonna put our rock dust, the magic rock dust, all over it, and all the gaps and screws are gonna disappear. And these customers are about to enjoy this beautiful Maldives kit. It's gonna be pretty special.